This is the Alcohol Free Lifestyle Podcast, where you learn to live a life of health, wealth, love, and happiness.
This is kind of hard to admit, and I'm doing it on a podcast that goes all over the place. But here it goes. I was obsessed with alcohol. I didn't even realize it at the time. Now, when I say I was obsessed with alcohol, I'm not exaggerating, and it may have not looked like what you might be imagining. I'm going to share some of my obsession of the past with you all. I'm going to explain the science of why I was so obsessed, and if that word doesn't sound too far off base for you, it will help you understand as well. And most importantly, I'm going to share how it came to pass that I don't even think about drinking anymore. That sounds crazy to say out loud, even after years of not drinking. But it's true. You know, people who get into this industry, they don't do it because they're interested in selling a falsehood. We do it because of passion and because it's real and we want it for others. I'm Victoria English, head coach at Alcohol Free Lifestyle. I'm so glad you're here today. My intention with each episode is to empower you, to allow you to try on some different thoughts, to understand the why behind some of the things we do and why we do them. This is in an effort to allow you some self compassion, try on some self compassion. For me, much of the self compassion came through understanding science. So, back to that obsession. Ooh. If you've heard my story, I was one of those wine moms. I thought I was cute. I was not that original. I was like a lot of the wine moms out there. And even at its worst, my drinking wasn't completely blowing up my entire life. Thankfully, yet it would have. And it wasn't always that way. It started out as something that kind of did the trick, helped me relax, helped me catch my breath when I was struggling with a profound loss in my life and was experiencing anxiety and panic. I never thought it would happen to me. And when it did, I was shocked. And I stayed in that state for a long time. I'll take you through a typical day back when I was drinking. For several of those years, I was a stay at home mom with 4 kids. And a day would go like this. I didn't drink every single day. I drank toward the end more days per week than I did not, with lots of breaks along the way. Sometimes I could stop for, gosh, close to a year. Then it was like 7 months, 6 months, 3 months, then 4 months, then 2 weeks. So, just giving you that for context. But when I was in the cycle, when it was on, game on, a day might go like this. I would wake up every day, never missed taking my kids to school or anything like that. I would wake up and think, ugh, I did it again. I was not going to do that. I was only going to have that one glass while I made dinner. How did I go through most of a bottle? Or how did I go through a whole bottle? Ugh, I feel gross. How many calories was that? Ugh. Oh my gosh. And then I ate pizza. All right. Well, I got to get up and get to work. And then I have to do something about these calories. Ooh, that was a lot. So I'd get up. And of course, I was feeling a level of shame and exhaustion and swearing it off. There is no way I'm drinking today. I would go through my morning, getting kids' lunches made, breakfast, off to school, driving to school, and typically I'd go for a workout, if nothing more than as a Hail Mary for the sins I'd committed the night before with food and wine. And then I'd think, well, that helped. Okay, at least I got rid of some of the calories. By the way, if you haven't heard, I studied dietetics, so I have a very good knowledge of metabolism and basal metabolic rate and all of that. So I was way up in my head around what I had consumed, what I had burned off, the macros. It was ridiculous. Um, then I'd go through my day and I'd eat healthy, super lean, clean, and then something would set me off. It could be anything, really. A perceived slight, an annoyance, snarky kid, something with the house, the dogs, whatever. And suddenly the idea would pop into my head that maybe maybe I could just have a little to take the edge off. Sometimes I could push that away, battle it down, and not drink that day. But it became harder and harder. And so I would start the negotiations. All right, well, if I've got that one glass left from last night's bottle, so I'll have that. Let's see, what do I have to do first? Okay, I've got to drive here, 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 this lesson, that lesson, that lesson, that activity, pick up the medication for the dogs, cook dinner, check homework. I got to fold that laundry. Okay, so once I check the homework and that's done, then I can have that glass. Well, it wasn't a glass. Do you relate? All right, so then there I was again. Crazy. So why was that? Well, I thought it was because I was a loser. It's not. It was my brain chemistry. My brain chemistry had changed. Nothing felt as good as it used to. And things that did feel good, I was convinced would feel better with the drink. That's because alcohol impacted my brain's ability to create dopamine. So, of course, I was down on myself. Of course, those workouts that used to give me that endorphin high and that dopamine and all the feel good stuff, they were just going through the motions. And again, calculating if how much of the damage I could undo from the day before. Things didn't seem very fun. I was also operating with, you know, well, I'll get to that in a second. But of course, life didn't feel that fun. That doesn't even bring into account the issues at home. My kids knew when I was drinking. So even if I would act like everything was fine, we all knew that everything wasn't fine. At best, I was just a little bit tuned out from the day. And at worst, it was worse. I was emotional, I was moody, I was sloppy. And so my brain felt flat, it felt blue. Alcohol gives you a huge dopamine spike. That's associated with pleasure, reward. So, of course, if you're thinking, I deserve a drink, that feels very, very real to you. What you're saying is, I deserve some dopamine. And you do, except that long term alcohol consumption messes up our dopamine. And that's why we come to believe that we really do need a drink. It also affects the GABA, the glutamate. It affects the balance so that your brain creates more glutamate, which gets you excited, not in a good way, and less GABA, which is the calming part. That's the neurotransmitter that helps you feel relaxed and calm. So you've got more of the anxiety, less of the relaxation. Is it any wonder that at the end or in the middle of a day, you feel anxious, irritable, and you didn't sleep well the night before? And you might be already in the negotiation stage of when you can drink again. I hope this is helpful, just to understand the science. You're not a bad person. This is what alcohol does to a brain. You're very special in some ways, I'm sure. You're not special in this way because this is what a drug does. It hijacks the reward system, creates that deficit, then come the cravings, etc., etc., etc. Now, how is it possible that I got to where I am today, given that was my past? We'll talk about that. There was another aspect that was making me, yes, obsessed with alcohol. Now, this can vary. This is the physical withdrawal part. When you think of physical withdrawal from alcohol, what comes to mind? For me, it was like watching, maybe a medical drama that you'd seen in the past. Someone comes into the ER and they're in alcohol withdrawal, and they're trembling, maybe having seizures, sweating profusely, can't stand up on their own. It's very, very dangerous. And that, unfortunately, is a reality of physical withdrawal from alcohol. It can get to that point. I wish I could say that it wouldn't, that there'd be a stopping point, except there isn't, because alcohol isn't done with us until we make a really, really firm decision to be done with it. It's going to keep pushing you more and more into the dependence and addiction until it's possible that that could happen. I'm really grateful that it didn't get there with me. However, if you are drinking, you are experiencing physical withdrawal. Did you know that even people who are, quote, the normal drinkers, who have, let's say, two standard drinks, okay, not the heavy handed drinks, but 2 5-ounce glasses of wine with dinner, or 2 1.5 ounces of alcohol in a mixed drink over a course of a couple of hours, things like that, or 2 beers. Even those folks experience some level of withdrawal. And it's probably not that dramatic, but if you ask your friends who can take it or leave it, how they feel after having a couple of drinks, how do they feel the next day? Chances are they're going to say, I feel a little bit foggy. Yeah, I feel like I didn't sleep as well. Do you have any friends who have Oura rings, who drink very rarely? Ask them, hey, that time that you went to dinner and I saw you had like 2 beers, what was your sleep like? Can you look at that up on your Oura ring history? And so this isn't the kind of thing that you suddenly get. Oh, now I drank enough that I have physical withdrawal. No, we all have it because alcohol is recognized by your body as a toxin. And so it's working really hard to get rid of it. So, physical withdrawal. Well, when I talked about my day, yeah, I'd gone to work out and maybe my headache had subsided, but then came some physical withdrawal. As the alcohol left my system, my brain was saying, I don't remember how to make feel good chemicals, not enough to help you feel anything decent. And so, am I going to get my glass of dopamine soon? That's just one example. And so then when I did stop for longer periods of time, I had to go through that physical withdrawal that I was aware of. That led to things like heightened anxiety. I felt really, really anxious after about 2 or 3 days of not drinking. I felt GI distress. I couldn't decide if I was hungry, not hungry. Nothing really appealed to me, then everything appealed to me. That has to do also with our blood sugar regulation, blood sugar regulation, the pancreas, all those things. And so, I was all over the place. Am I hungry? Am I not hungry? My stomach aches. I I feel gross. Um, my sleep was garbage. That felt really terrible. The inability to sleep or waking up in the middle of the night, tossing and turning. I couldn't get comfortable in my skin. So yeah, it didn't look like that ER episode, but it sure didn't feel good. And it takes time. Now, if you go through those severe things, tremors, overwhelming anxiety, panic attacks, you can't breathe, go see a doctor. Alcohol withdrawal can actually be deadly. And if you find yourself going through something like that, please go get help. Again, I'm just lucky that I got out of there before it got to that point. I'm sure it would have. So then another thing that contributed to my obsession was psychological dependence. So, habits and associations. I had so many associations with drinking. I needed it if I was going to socialize with my girlfriends. I needed it after a stressful day. I needed it if I was watching football. I needed it if I went to an Italian restaurant. Who in their right mind eats pasta without wine? Except when I think about obsession, I mean, it took up so much of my thought processes. So let's say I did want to go out to eat. I didn't want to go to a place that I knew didn't have good wines, good wines. I didn't want to go to a place where I knew they would only pour a 5-ounce glass. Isn't that terrible? I can't believe that. But I would. I'd think, oh no, they've got that little line on the glass. They're not going to be generous with their pours. I'm not going to go there. I'll go somewhere else. I love Asian food. I love sushi, and I would rarely go because wine with sushi didn't sound appealing and I didn't like sake. So I missed out on all that delicious sushi. And I lived in Miami at the time, so we had great stuff. So I would miss out on that because I was obsessed with the alcohol. So the psychological dependence is very real. And often, because it happens so gradually, we don't realize it until we're on the other side. If someone would have said to me back then, Victoria, you are obsessed with alcohol, I would have been offended and I would have shot back with, obsessed? What are you talking about? Like, eh, Do you see me drinking when I wake up in the morning? Do you see me like neglecting my responsibilities so that I can sit in my closet and drink? Right? I mean, that's what I would have come back with because it was so insidious. I didn't recognize how much space it was taking up in my life until I had some distance away from it. And so this might be the kind of thing where you're like, hmm, yeah, I don't know. Am I obsessed? I don't know. That's up to you, and you can choose a different word or not, or whatever works for you. But, you know, the dependence, the psychological part of it comes back to the craving and reward system. My brain's reward system had been conditioned to expect alcohol in certain situations. It was like peas and carrots. And so when I would not have alcohol in those situations, it felt like a big letdown. It wasn't worth it. It would take away from any ability to really and truly enjoy the event. Nothing felt complete without a drink or four or more. And so what in the world, right? I can look back on that version of myself now with compassion. And a lot of that has come through understanding the science. Because you guys, I mean, you may have heard me say, I started to wonder if I was certifiably nuts. Like, wow, this girl, she's off the rails and she's not coming back. I wasn't. This had happened in my brain and it had been reinforced over and over again until it got to the point that I was very much in the dependence phase of alcohol. Thankfully, I wasn't in full blown addiction, but I also hadn't always been in the dependence stage, just like you. You weren't always where you are today. It's the nature of the beast, it's what alcohol does. And so, what is this magic? Well, this magic is something that takes place during Project 90, our 90-day stop drinking program, at least for 90 days. It's based on the science. And so in our program, you are rewiring your brain. You're engaging in activities that you used to love or that you've been curious about trying, with the understanding that they're not going to feel as good as a drink right now. That's okay. We do them anyway, because members here are high achievers who understand that reaching a goal takes effort and consistency. And so you're doing things to literally create new neural pathways. We become mindful and aware of triggers, cravings, and we don't act on them. And that's something I had to learn to do. I used to beat down triggers and cravings. They're going to get me. They're not going to get you. What we're doing is lengthening the pause between the trigger and the craving. We're lengthening the space between those things and your response. Because if you're in this space right now, I get it, where the trigger, the craving hits, and next thing you know, you're 2, 3, 4 drinks in. I get it. With practice, consistency, coaching, accountability, and regenerating white and gray matter in your brain, you lengthen that time so that you're aware of the craving, aware of the trigger, and you say, yep, there it is. What do I choose to do with it? I don't have to act on it. So again, that helps you tap into the neuroplasticity, creating new pathways in your brain. We are developing healthy coping strategies. I used to joke that, I remember finding this, or maybe I made it, this list of 50 things to do instead of taking a drink. I hated that list. I just wanted to have a drink. Except my truth was I didn't want a drink. And if you're listening to this, you probably don't want a drink. You want more. And that's all right. Nature of the beast. And so I didn't really want to do those things. I just wanted to feel better. Except when I learned about the science, I thought, wait, this isn't just someone saying, here's 50 things to do instead of have a drink. These are things that actually work if I stick with them, even if I don't like them in the beginning. Even if I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to do deep breathing, just give me a glass of wine." And so I trusted the science. And I trusted people around me who I had seen succeed because I knew them and they were really, really good people and they wanted the best for me. They weren't just saying this to say it. And so I kept doing it. I kept doing those things. I also surrounded myself with like minded people, people who maybe they were alcohol free, maybe they weren't, but if they did drink, they drank very little. It was truly they're the type they'll just, I don't know, I'll have a glass of wine with a dinner, a whole dinner, one glass. Fascinating. And so I'd be around people like that and it made me want to level up. It got me curious about my own potential. Like I said, I was a stay-at-home mom, but I'd had a career in the past. I knew I was going to work again when my youngest got older. And so I'd always been the type to level up, and I'd kind of lost that about myself. So that social support is really helpful. And that's what you get, a ready-made community of like-minded people. You're going to have a lot more in common with these folks than, oh, you drank too much too. And then also, I gradually desensitized myself to situations. I mentioned the Italian restaurants. Oh my gosh, I thought going to an Italian restaurant without drinking sounds just awful. But then I realized, wait a minute, I love Italian food. I've loved it since I was a kid, some of my favorite meals. And so I reframed it. Like, wait, Victoria, you didn't start eating Italian food with wine. You just loved the food. So I would treat myself to excellent Italian restaurants and a fancy sparkling water in a fancy glass. And it felt good. I actually learned that I could taste the food more because alcohol dulls our taste buds and our olfactory sense. So I was able to enjoy the food more. I also wasn't drinking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of calories worth of wine. And so dessert was back on the menu. That was nice. So over time, it wasn't, oh no, I'm going to an Italian restaurant and I can't drink. It was, I get to go to an Italian restaurant and eat something delicious. Also, my restaurant bills were so much less. I remember double checking the bill. Did they charge us for everything? And so that was a positive reinforcement. Like, wow, I've saved a lot of money. That's always nice. So it took me out of FOMO to JOMO, fear of missing out, to joy of missing out. Joy of missing out on dollars stacking on top of each other for my bill. Calories, calories, calories. Sloppiness, missing out on the deliciousness of my food, missing out on Uber bills, missing out on sloppiness and low productivity. And so that mindset shift of I'm not giving something up, I'm actually gaining better health, mental clarity, improved relationships. When that started to happen and I kept reinforcing it, over time, I couldn't believe it, but here it was, and here I am today. Alcohol became irrelevant. I don't notice it. I know that sounds crazy, but when I go into an Italian restaurant, I don't notice the wine bottles on display unless I make a point of it. That's freedom. There's nothing about me or the other coaches or our members that is so different from you. And if these things sound good, but you can't quite do them on your own, why not be part of a team, a winning team? My invitation, as always, is to book that 15-minute discovery call. We're not selling you anything. We're just going to have a conversation. That's a huge step and a very brave step. Let's see if you're a fit for our program. You might be, you might not be. That's all right. But having that conversation is a huge step in the right direction because you're taking action. Give yourself 90 days. Give your brain 90 days to heal, to see what's possible. If you don't, won't you always wonder? Until next time, thanks so much for joining me. Thanks for allowing me to be vulnerable with you and share my story in an effort to help you with yours. Take good care.
Thanks so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about our stop drinking services, you can go to alcoholfreelifestyle.com. You can follow me on Instagram at James Swanwick. Our YouTube channel is at alcoholfreelifestyle.com/YouTube, or you can send me an email at james@alcoholfreelifestyle.com.